I'm so excited to be commentating with you.
I know, I've wanted to do this for such a long time.
I just, every time I look at you, I'm just like, Dwee, he's the best.
I like Jay. I like you. I want to work with you, and I'm so happy that I get to do it.
I'm so glad I paid you to say that. That was actually incredible. Like, my life has been made. So, what do you think about the last couple of rounds? The last round we saw?
I mean, in the last round, on the mainstream, we actually had a great comeback from Giovanni Costa versus Aaron Grubbs, both American players. So that was exciting to see. Just for match 1, we did skip round 2, but we are ready to get underway into round 3, which means that players' tournaments' lives are actually already on the line.
If you've managed to get 2 losses in the first round, then this is really crunch time for you, isn't it?
This is the time to make that comeback. Everybody dreams of it. Your back's against the wall. Hey, guess what? I need to win out. And people have done it before, and I'm excited to see if we can see any players be able to make it out. You can't count yourself out. Just like in that match in the mainstream with Giovanni Costa, Aaron Grubbs played exceptionally well.
Yep.
Giovanni, however, found his out, and then he found another out. He needed to get a freeze. He got the freeze.
Amazing.
And then from there, Aaron kind of thought that he had a couple more turns to play around, but then a clutch skill swap from Cresselia onto a Mega Venusaur, taking away that thick fat, allowed Kyogre to be able to pick up the KO with an Ice Beam.
Did you say Mega Venusaur?
Mega Venusaur was on the mainstream, yeah.
I also heard that there was a Slowbro.
Yeah, there was a Slowbro on Aaron's side.
Aaron?
Aaron's side had the Slowbro and the Venusaur, yeah.
Wow.
I know.
That's such a cool team.
I know, and Slowbro is kind of a Pokemon that was introduced during the U.S. Nationals. Enosh Shachar.
Yep.
He was running it, and it has a lot of cool techs. It's able to set up Trick Room. It can kind of deal with Groudon pretty well because it has high physical defense. It's a water type, which can hit it super effectively as long as you can get the proper weather up.
Yep.
And also it has Oblivious, so it cannot be taunted.
Yeah, and I mean, when paired alongside Rayquaza, you've got the ability to switch in your Rayquaza alongside it and launch a Scald or something similar down towards that Groudon, hopefully take it out.
And it's just such an exciting battle, and I saw the battle on here too, an exciting battle as well between Koki versus Cody.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, it was really great. It was a really great game to cast. Like, everyone seemed to be having such a good time. When we spoke to Koki afterwards, he said how much fun he had playing that match. And I think that's one of the main things about the World Championships. I mean, obviously everyone wants to be the world champion. I want to be the world champion, but
you'll get there. You'll get there.
Let's hope so, eh?
Next year, right? Next year?
Yeah, obviously. But so everyone wants to be the world champion. Being the world champion in Pokemon is such an honor. But at the same time, you're here to have fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is your first World Championships, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
And this is my 7th World Championship. Just attending.
Oh, okay.
I've only competed once, but just to throw it out there that I used to play this game pretty well. I used to be pretty good at this game.
No, you're a pretty good commentator now as well.
I believe we talked about this yesterday where I said that I was actually, what was that thing that I said yesterday?
Okay. Dwee wants to get the soundbite of me saying... Dwee is the best commentator ever.
I complimented you earlier.
Okay.
I complimented you earlier. Now it's your turn, to pay it back.
Well, it happened here. That was the secret. Dwee has basically made me say that on camera. So I think it's official now, right?
It's in the record books now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, guys, who do you think is the #1 commentator out of all the VGC guys here? Like, if you go onto social media, you can let us know using the hashtag #PlayPokemon. You can follow us on twitter.com/Pokemon, or you can go onto instagram.com/Pokemon to check out all the great images that we've got. A lot of really exciting plush lines. You can see the exclusive Pikachu plush that's available at Worlds 2016. You can also go onto youtube.com/Pokemon, which we have updated with previous battle videos from VGC events like the US Nationals, and also you can go onto facebook.com/Pokemon to like and follow content that we put up there.
Yeah, a lot of great content on there. I was actually watching YouTube earlier this morning, just watching some replays of the battle videos from the national championships. Just try to catch myself up, and it's great that we can be able to catch up like that.
I mean, it's really great for us as commentators just to recap some of the important events, or if you're Dwee, to realize that you're the best commentator ever. But no, I mean, it's a really good tool as well for everyone at home who's practicing, because it allows the opportunity to analyze the games yourself, and that's a really big part of the video game championship series, is knowing how people play and knowing what's important to the metagame and what key devices people have used to win certain tournaments.
Absolutely, and a lot of players, when they do play, they take notes. And that's an important part because you want to keep track of everything that your opponent has. It's great to be able to reflect on your notes, going forward, looking back. Hey, I made some mistakes here. Hey, maybe I should have done this instead of this. Maybe this would have played out differently. Notes are a great way to reflect on your play, and that's a great way to practice as well. You kind of have to look at yourself and then also remember what your opponents have.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at what other people are doing as well helps inform what you want to do. I mean, it's not as simple as directly copying someone's playstyle because, like, different playstyles don't fit certain people. Like, for me, when I play Pokemon, I like to have bulky Pokemon that can switch.
Right.
And that's really important to my playstyle. I like to take things slower, whereas, like, against someone like Arashramati, who is extremely aggressive, he is kind of a rush-down player when you think about it, that playstyle wouldn't suit me. And so it's understanding how you play against these other matchups and what sort of teams are really popular and who's setting trends.
Absolutely, and you prefer the slower, bulkier, hey, I'm going to set up Trick Room, hey, you can't knock me out in one hit.
Yeah.
I am just like Arash, though. I prefer the hyper-offensive rushdown. I'm going to knock out your Pokemon before you can even move. But
oh god,
it's different playstyles, you're right. I feel like the world's metagame has always moved towards a more slow, bulky format, right? Obviously at the beginning of the year, we were heavy on offense, fast Xerneas, fast Primal Groudon, and as time develops, players begin to realize
to get as much experience as possible, meet people, and kind of appreciate everything that's around. Of course, the more competitive ones.
my Xerneas, guess what? I'm actually slower, I'm bulkier, I'm not going to get KO'd by it.
Exactly, and I think it's also part of it is understanding which Pokemon need to be bulky and which Pokemon don't. Because certain Pokemon, the support variants, maybe like a more offensive support Pokemon like Weavile, you can get away with holding a Life Orb, which will boost its damage for 1-2, like basically to keep it around for 1-2 turns to set up the Pokemon next to it, do what you need to, so you can get a free switch in. And I think having the free switch, having a Pokemon faint, isn't necessarily a bad thing in this metagame.
Not necessarily. This game is a lot about momentum. I talk about every single time that I'm on stream. Okay, this player may be down, 2-4, like we saw in the previous in the previous round with Koki.
He went down to just 2 Pokemon left, a Smeargle and a Xerneas, but it was the fact that he managed to get them both in alongside each other.
It's all about timing your switches perfectly, and sometimes that may actually come because, hey, guess what? My Pokemon got knocked out. I'm down to the count, but hey, now I get a perfect duo in. Let's say you have a Bronzong next to a Rayquaza, and then your Rayquaza gets knocked out. Yeah, it's going to hurt because, that's a restricted Pokemon, that's a heavy hitter, but now guess what? I get to send in my Kangaskhan instead and provide some fake out support and maybe get up Trick Room, maybe get up a Hypnosis, maybe get up a Skill Swap. So it's all about timing and not necessarily about I have the Pokemon lead, I'm winning. It's about momentum, board position, all of that.
Yeah, but I think what we can take away from that as well is that it's not just about how you manage your switches, but the opponent knows this as well. So maybe they would leave a key knockout. So instead of going directly on a knockout on a weaker Pokemon or a Pokemon that's a bit more frail, they will double into the opposing Pokemon and get it into a position where they can knock out both at the same time. So they'll deny you that free switch.
Or even, kind of slow playing it a little bit, protecting your Pokemon instead of going on the offensive that turn, just to make sure that you can get the positioning that you want instead, right? Like, let's say I have a Kangaskhan, and I'm ready to go on the offensive, and I know that if I knock out one of their Pokemon at this moment, that's going to go ahead and provide a better switch later on. I might want to either switch myself, maybe not do anything with the Kangaskhan at all, maybe power a punch on the side.
Yeah. So, guys, we are still at day 1 of the World Championships, and we've got 2 more days of amazing Pokemon action to come up with you. So for day 1, we were still in Swiss. So the way that this plans out is that if you lose more than 2 games, you will not be able to make it through to day 2, which is a real big shame because everyone's come from all over the world and they want to make it through to the knockout stage of the tournament. If you manage to make it through to day 2, there are a few more players added into that pool. Some
the best of the world, the best of players' regions, they join the field of battle.
Which makes it harder for those day 1 entrants.
Oh yeah, I mean, day 1 is a tournament that I probably would not want to play. Even if I got my invite, I'd probably just show up, be discouraged. Well, these players, obviously, they're ready to go. They believe in themselves. I don't believe in myself.
They got the steel of mind. So yeah, we got into day 2, and you got a few more players added in, and they're the best of the best. But once we get to that Swiss stage again, obviously, if you lose more than 2 matches, you're out.
Right.
And then there comes the single elimination bracket. And that's a real grinder.
It's a tough format to play, but I think it's probably one of the best formats that we've seen for the World Championships. A couple years ago, we were actually relying on Swiss to determine who was going to be cutting. And the unfortunate part about that is that, you're not in complete control of whether or not you top cut based on whether or not you are on that bubble. So right now we eliminate the bubble by just go ahead and having, hey, you didn't win, you lost only 2 matches. Congratulations, you move on to the next round.
Yeah.
That's a great format. It really removes a lot of the
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty,
Right?
yeah, exactly. And as a player, you don't want that. You don't want to have your world's run end short simply because my opponents were in control of me. I want to be in control of where I end up, right?
Yeah. And we were talking about it earlier, Ray and I. If you pick up an early loss, then you understand what is on the line now.
It's a tough way to crawl back. You have to be able to win out and hope that your opponents also win out as well. But in this way, you just have to be the one that wins out.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing for everyone that's participating at the World Championship this year. It being best of 3 allows you more options to understand what your opponent wants to do and try to counter that later on in your matches. And then if you've got that first round loss or further on into the tournament, you've been having a really great day, but you just pick up one loss due to like a bad matchup or a bit of luck that didn't go your way, then you know what you need to do. Like, you know how many matches you need to win, how many matches you can afford to lose without being knocked out.
Right. I've actually had to make that comeback before. This was all the way back in 2010 when I was actually decent at this game.
You love the 2010
The
format.
2010 format was probably the last format in which we had the big restricted Pokemon. We were able to use Groudon and Kyogre. At the U.S. National Championships, I already had my 2 losses.
Yeah.
One more loss meant that I was out for sure. And at that point, I actually had to rely on my tiebreaker. And I was able to crawl back. And you don't know exactly what's going to happen. This is the game that we play. This is Pokemon, right? Anything can happen. Comebacks are possible.
Yes.
Just believe and just play your hardest.
That's a T-shirt right there for you guys. Believe in Pokemon. But no, I mean it's totally true though. I mean anything can happen. We've seen so many games turn on one momentous turn where everything shifts in one player's direction, and that's the most exciting thing.
Even as commentators of the game, there are some matches where we're just watching it. We think that there's a clear winner, and then just something happens, and then it's a complete reverse of exactly what we thought would happen. Right?
I love that. I love those moments. They're incredible, and you can see it happening as well. Where it's just like, wow, these guys really understand their game, and maybe they've been playing, holding a little bit back, and then when they drop their tech or they drop something that you haven't expected yet, it melts your mind.
Maybe some players, they just try to set up the early game, but then they decide to go ahead and go really and push really strong for that end game.
Yeah. So a little bit about the 2010 format, Dwee. So obviously you were saying it's very similar to the 2016 format. So if you guys haven't been familiar with VGC history, I mean, this is a good chance to learn about what happened back in 2010. So what sort of things were popular at that time?
Back in the day, Groudon and Kyogre were very popular, but back in the day, of course, they didn't have the red orb or the blue orb.
Yes.
So primals were not a thing. Xerneas wasn't a thing, so that actually meant that Dialga and Palkia, dragons that I personally really enjoy, they're great trick room setters. They actually don't come out as often anymore.
Very bulky.
Very bulky, and Dragon type back then was just amazing. It hit so hard, hit like a truck. Only Steel types could resist it. But the fact that Xerneas was actually introduced kind of put a check on Palkia and Dialga as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and back in the day, again, just reminiscing.
I
Right?
just love that you're saying back in the day so much as well.
That
you
was
need to just like get you a little blanket.
That was 6 years ago. That's a
I know.
long time.
I mean, especially in the way that the formats shift, right?
It feels like just yesterday, but again, I'm just living in the past. But
I don't think so, man. This is entirely relevant to this metagame as well. For example, we talked about Lee Provost, one of the UK players. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make it to the World Championship, but
Hitmontop and Kyogre,
he's been using Hitmontop Kyogre all season.
which was a very popular duo all the way back in 2010. 2010 was a bit different in the fact that you could have multiple restricted Pokemon. However, you can only bring 2 to the game. In this format, we are hard restricted to just 2.
Yeah.
So we can only have 2 on our team in team preview. A lot of great things came out of 2010. Ray Rizzo was the 2010 world champion.
Yeah.
You might.
I think I've met him once.
I think you might have met him.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know at the time, and I was just like, "What?" Of course, everyone knows who Ray Rizzo is. 3-time world champion, like amazing guy.
Yeah, Cresselia was still popular back then. Abomasnow was one of the more popular Pokemon simply because of, it's the counter to all the weather.
Yep.
Unfortunately, because of the primal weather, the Desolate Land, the Primordial Sea, that doesn't allow hail to come into play.
Yeah.
And, it was just a very bulky format towards the end, I'm not sure if you know anything about it at all, but a Trick Room Mewtwo made it to the top 8
Yep,
of the World
yep,
Championships. Lantern made it to the top 8 of the World Championships.
I didn't know about a Lantern.
Rotom Moform made it to the World Championships.
That made it to in 2014 as well, though.
Back in the day, it was just a Ghost Electric type, though. It didn't get that cool Grass typing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But guys, so we've talked a little bit about the VGC history, and maybe you're new to VGC, maybe you're new to the Video Game Championship Series as a whole, and have only played the core series in the way that it's supposed to be played with single paddles. So why don't we show you a short video just letting you know how to get involved with the VGC.
Hello trainers! If you enjoy playing the Pokemon games and are looking for a new challenge, why not consider entering the Pokemon Video Game Championships? The Video Game Championships use a special battle format. Bring a team of 6 Pokemon, choose 4 of those for the match, and attack using 2 Pokemon at a time. That's called a double battle. Team preview is very important. This means the battle against your opponent starts before the match even begins. You know what your opponent's 6 Pokemon are, but you don't know which 4 they'll be choosing to use in the upcoming match. Choose 4 of your Pokemon carefully based on what you think your opponent might do. Get inside their head. And now the match begins. It's a 2-on-2 double battle. Half of your chosen team is immediately out in the fray. What do? Do you ask each of your 2 Pokemon to attack, to protect themselves, switch out, or to lend a helping hand to their partner? Will your opponent focus their attack on one of your Pokemon, or throw out a combo attack that targets both of your Pokemon? Whoa, didn't see that coming. In a double battle, your Pokemon's moves can target either opposing Pokemon. Some moves target both Pokemon at once. There are even attacks so powerful that they hit everyone, including your own Pokemon. However, the attacking Pokemon's partner can use its typing or abilities to avoid that damage. You can also use certain moves to help your ally. Remember this, and don't be afraid to get creative. That escalated quickly. Each turn, the fastest Pokemon of the 4 will move first. It's important to keep track of how fast each Pokemon might be. Moves that inflict status conditions such as burn, paralysis, or sleep are powerful. Make sure your team has a way to deal with them, or you'll get overwhelmed. Pokemon abilities can be extremely useful in a double battle as well. Compared to the single battles you might be used to, battles in the Video Game Championships are very fast-paced. A player could have all 4 of their Pokemon knocked out in just a few turns. Play strategically, but remember you only have 45 seconds to make a decision each turn, and 15 minutes total for the entire battle. In the rare event of a match timing out, the player with the healthier team wins. Is your team strong enough to take on Arceus? What about 6 Arceus? Don't worry, you'll be safe from its judgment. The mythical Pokemon you may have received from special events cannot be used in the Video Game Championships, but this year, most other legendary Pokemon are allowed to participate. They are known as restricted Pokemon, and only 2 Pokemon from this category are allowed in your full team of 6 Pokemon. There are also rules ensuring no 2 Pokemon or held items on a team can be the same, so expect to see some variety. This short video is only covering the basics. Keep watching the World Championships and check out the players demonstrating the more advanced techniques, such as speed control, predicting your opponent's next move, defensive switching, ability combos. Planning a strategic Video Game Championships ready team can take a lot of work, but there are fantastic resources available to help. You can test out your teams right from home using the Pokemon Global link. When you've got a battle-tested team at the ready, head to your nearest regional championships. Get more information about tournaments at Pokemon.com/playPokemon or about Pokemon strategy at Pokemon.com/strategy. Good luck!
Thanks again, Scott. And he's not wrong, you know. Watching the World Championship is a really great way to learn how to play this game.
It's a great way. I mean, you know, you get to see what other people are using. You get to see what, you know, you just get to watch other people play, you know, pick up different play styles.
We mentioned it before, and like even if you're new to the Pokemon video game or championship series, or if you're a returning competitor, watching the best in the world really ups your game.
No, absolutely. I mean, you pick up on a lot of tendencies that a lot of the top tier players actually do have. You know, I believe that there actually are, you know, things that top tier players do that kind of separate them from the rest of the bunch, you know?
Yep.
One thing that I'm a big fan of is actually realizing when, hey, my Pokemon should be knocked out right now, let's just go ahead and kind of get it off the field safely so I can get something into the field safely, right?
Yep.
I mean, I've done it before. I've Earthquaked in my own Pokemon just to be able to pick up KOs on my own Pokemon so that I can get my safe switch in.
You renegade.
I know.
Yeah.
I play by my own rules.
Best commentator. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the things, and I think we've actually got in day one some of these top elite players.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the video itself mentioned Jody Azzarelli, sorry,
Oh,
who's one of the best players in the US. He made it through to the finals of the World Championships back in 2014. Unfortunately, he lost to Sagen Park. I mean, not unfortunately for us, because that was a fantastic match.
Fantastic set, fantastic teams from both players.
Yeah,
and
it was really great. I mean, it was super amazing to watch from home. I remember seeing it clearly, and everyone that I spoke to afterwards was just like, those games are incredible.
A lot of former Worlds competitors are actually in the field for day one, right? You know, we talk about exactly how stacked this tournament is. You know, Jody Azzarelli is just one person to name. You know, we have Cedric Bernier, who was the undefeated at U.S. Nationals going into day two.
Really strong field.
Really strong field. You know, some European players, Marcus Statter, right? Marcus Statter, the European commentator.
Yep,
who
we've also
with.
got one of the other European commentators, Nemanja Sandic, as well, who in 2014 actually came 10th in the World Championship. Marcus is a multinational winner. So really two strong performers. We've also got Florian Verdak, another German player who's in day one, who's a multi-world competitor as well.
Lots of former world competitors, lots of former national champions. We even have the Australian national champion, Phil Nguyen, who is also playing in day one of the few national competitors that has to compete in day one simply because of how stacked that area was, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. We've got so many great people playing in this tournament, and there's only so many few spots that will move into day two.
I know, and Aaron said it earlier, you know, there's a lot of players that I could actually see in this field of day one being able to move on to day two and maybe even winning it all, which of course, it's a crazy feat to achieve, you know. It kind of reminds me about a couple years ago with the Last Chance qualifier, you know, players that were able to advance from the Last Chance qualifier and win the entire thing. You know, that's a lot of Pokemon to play in one weekend. You know, you had to go through day one, got to go through day two, and then you got to be able to go through and finish up in the finals, you know?
It's like a Cinderella story, isn't it, really? I mean, imagine being able to make it into this field, get to the World Championships, you're in day one, you know you've got so many rounds of Swiss to get through before you can even progress into day two, where the contest gets even harder, the stakes are higher at this point.
Right.
And to be able to go the whole way and do everything, it must be fantastic for these players.
Yeah, just to name a few players that have had to do so in the past, you know, in the seniors division, Hayden McTavish in 2013 had to go through the Last Chance qualifier and ended up winning it all against Ben Hickey. Back in 2011, Cameron Jahadi actually had to go through the Last Chance qualifier and actually ended up defeating a name that I think is pretty familiar to you, Sejun Park, in the finals of 2011.
Wait. Of course, Sagen Park, but he's actually playing TCG this year.
I know.
So he's given
amazing.
the contest a bit of a rest.
I know, that's amazing that he was able to qualify for the World Championships in the trading card game.
It just shows how much of a tactical mind he has, and obviously people must know that Sagen Park brought that Pachirisu. You saw it at the end of the video that we just showed you, which was a very key part of his team. It managed to redirect certain attacks away from his Mega Gyarados at that point so that he could get a key Dragon Dance up and just deal massive damage to all the Pokemon around it.
And it all comes down to the whole debate between, you know, making that metagame call or playing against a team that you're comfortable with, right? And maybe that metagame call that you make is what you're comfortable with, just like most likely with Sagen, right?
Yep.
You know, he had a lot of cool techs on that team. You know, Pachirisu was there to protect his Pokemon well. And
he had the Gothitelle
as well. The trap attack, like trapped Kangaskhan's, and then also had Tickle to kind of, you know, slow down their attack, you know, kind of weaken them on the defensive side as well.
Didn't bother with a Trick Room mode either. He went for the Thunder Wave. And so he wanted to have speed control, but he didn't want to compromise the Pokemon they had on the field. Just lower down the speed of everyone else around and make sure that they can't move. So Gothitelle obviously has the ability to Shadow Trap. And when you're in under Shadow Trap, you cannot switch out unless you're a Ghost-type Pokemon.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, that's going to come into play here, I think, in the World Championships. You know, this is the last tournament of the year, pretty much. You know, this is the last tournament of the season. They've gone through the gauntlet of a season. You know, lots of premier challenges, regional championships, national championships, you know, online tournaments. So this is where I feel like everybody brings out their cool techs, you know, their secret techs that they've been working on all year to make work. And, you know, hopefully they're comfortable with it. And, you know, we've seen some cool things already on the mainstream, like Slowbro.
Yeah.
Slowbro, Venusaur.
Evan was having such a good time about that Slowbro. He loves Slowbro. But the thing is, I mean, even in the match that we had on this stream, I mean, we had quite a standard-ish team from Koki. It was Xerneas Groudon with Bronzong support and Smeargle. But from Cody, he went for a Mungus and Scrafty combination, which is something we've seen on Phil Nguyen's team from Australian Nationals. But also, it's been picking up a bit of steam later on in the format for for Europe as well. So people have come to realize that Scrafty offers a certain style of support.
It does provide Intimidate support, which is really cool.
Yeah.
It does have one glaring weakness, and that is the fact that it is quadruple weak to Xerneas, which is kind of a tough cookie to bite, you know?
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, I have great fake out support. I can have access to Super Fang. I can knock off to, you know, find out items and not let my opponent use them. But if I face off against Xerneas, I might get knocked out right off the bat.
But the thing is, I think it took so long for people to get to want to bring Scrafty to these tournaments because it has been a very popular Pokemon in World Championships previously because of the ability, how bulky it can be.
Yes.
And its dark and fighting type moves hit a lot of Pokemon with great coverage. But the reason that Pokemon like Scrafty haven't been used so much is because Knockoff, one of its main attacks, which received a boost after Pokemon Black and White, it doesn't actually be able to knock off too many items now because Mega Stones, Blue Orbs, Red Orbs, they can't be knocked off. And these are maybe 3 items out of most people's teams.
Right, especially going up against the dual primal teams, you know, a core that I think is actually going to be a top contender to win the World Championships this year. Obviously, you know, we've seen that slide before about the 3 common pairs. You know, we have the Primal Groudon Xerneas core.
Yep.
We have the Kyogre Primal Groudon core. We also have the Rayquaza Primal Kyogre core, right? So there's a lot of things that you can't knock off. You're right. You know, orbs, Mega Stones, that's so unfortunate for Scrafty, but you know, you can still knock off some items.
Yeah, and I think that's why people like to bring it. It's got that Intimidate support. It's got everything. It's got everything that you want in a package usually, but maybe it's just not the format for it to flourish. But speaking of the format, obviously we are allowed 2 restricted legendary Pokemon in VGC 16, but there are some certain Pokemon that you cannot bring, and those are the mythical Pokemon. And so you can see that Deoxys, Keldeo, Volcanion, and Genesect are some of the popular Pokemon that cannot be brought this time round. I actually really like Volcanion. I think Volcanion could be a really great Pokemon if it was allowed in VGC 16.
I mean,
it's got that water absorb, which is fantastic. And I mean, this is something that we saw early in the VGC 16 metagame, that people will be using Lapras as a really strong counter a bit more of a check to Primal Kyogre teams, or teams that include like Kyogre and Rayquaza, because you've got the ability to use Freeze Dry to get big damage off into Primal Kyogre, but also you've got other ice type attacks to use on Rayquaza.
I personally prefer Gastrodon. I like Storm Drain.
I love Gastrodon. Gastrodon, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time.
Of course, we do have those banned Pokemon, but we do have the restricted Pokemon that we are allowed to use. You know, the Mewtwo, Lugia, Ho-Oh, Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, you know, all those Pokemon listed right there. You know, what's your personal favorite, Jay?
Out of all the restricted legendary Pokemon, I like a Mewtwo. I mean, obviously, I think it takes a lot of skill to use it. The issue being is that it's surprisingly frail. For a Pokemon with such immense power, it's very speedy, it's got a lot of special attack, but Kangaskhan being so prevalent with Sucker Punch, it does so much damage to Mewtwo, and it's really hard to use.
I think my personal favorite is actually Ho-Oh.
You love Ho-Oh?
Yeah, I mean, it's a world champion back in 2010 in the Little Juniors division.
And look how triumphant it's looking right here.
I mean,
it's been used early in the season as well.
Yeah, it's a great counter to Xerneas. Like, you know, it has a high special defense stat. You know, Xerneas, I believe even when it gets up a Geomancy, cannot knock you out in like 3 hits.
Yeah, I mean, also, if the Groudon on the opposing side of the field doesn't have a Rock-type move, it really struggles to hit Ho-Oh for significant damage.
But if it does have a Rock-type move, then
it's
you're kind of... your Ho-Oh is not looking too happy at all.
No. And this is the thing, guys. Obviously, we have these restricted legendary Pokemon that you can use, but it's all about how you pair them up.
Absolutely, you
and
know.
I think having a Ho-Oh alongside something like a Groudon, which would be able to boost its Fire-type attacks, be able to make Sacred Fire do significant damage to most Pokemon in the format. I've actually seen some people use Ho-Oh and Kyogre alongside each other, which doesn't sound like the most obvious choice, but it seems to be building up some success.
I did see a lot of that in the beginning of the season. Personally, I wasn't a fan of it, simply because, you know, it's kind of counterintuitive.
It feels counterintuitive, right?
It feels really counterintuitive because you want to be able to go for your Sacred Fires. You want to be able to get that 50% chance to burn your opponent, and also, you know, it's one of Ho-Oh's best moves, right? It's a little bit inaccurate, but the ability to hit for such power using the Fire type, you know, it can do a lot of damage, and then that burn can slowly chip away. Like a Xerneas going off against a Ho-Oh, most likely the Ho-Oh will be able to pick up the KO, after a while. But it does put a timer on it. Sacred Fire has a high chance to burn.
Yep.
That's good odds. I like that chip damage.
But the thing is, these restricted pair Pokemon, the most popular ones, the Groudon Xerneas, the Dual Primals, the Kyogre Rayquaza, the reason they're so powerful is because they're so consistent.
Yes.
And they give you so many options. They've got such high base stat totals. And against a more niche pick like our Mewtwo or our Ho-Oh, kind of struggle. I mean, the fact is that the reason these Pokemon are so popular is because they've performed so well.
Yeah, Rayquaza is a very popular Pokemon. It's picking up a lot of steam, as we saw in those pairings. The Rayquaza Kyogre core. Rayquaza hits on the physical spectrum most likely with that Dragon Ascent. Of course, it does have access to Draco Meteor.
So good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So good, right? But the fact that it hits on this physical side kind of puts a damper on Ho-Oh's party, right?
Yep.
Hey, I have this high special defense. Oh, hey, Rayquaza is going to go ahead and Dragon Ascent right into me.
Yep.
My Ho-Oh got knocked out. And that's one thing, too. Going into these battles, you had to kind of play protectively of your Pokemon. You had to protect your restricted Pokemon well.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why supporting them is so important. Bronzong is a great support Pokemon, providing Trick Room support, being able to put other Pokemon to sleep, so that you allow your very powerful restricted Pokemon to be able to pick up those KOs.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Bronzong, how do you feel about the swing towards the blind hypnosis? So for you guys at home who might not know the term blind hypnosis, it's when you use hypnosis, which has a low accuracy percentage to hit, outside of a move that would boost its accuracy, like gravity or, mostly gravity.
Personally, if you're going to be using hypnosis outside of gravity, I think you should be waiting for situations in which you don't rely on it. I interviewed some players at Nationals, and Rajan Ball actually said it best, in my opinion. If you hit the hypnosis, great. I wasn't expecting that, and that just makes it even better.
Yep.
If I miss it, I want to be in a position where if I miss it, it's not going to cost me the game. So I think you had to choose wisely when you decide to go for those hypnosis outside of gravity.
Yeah, and I think also it's probably one of those situations where, unless it's a Xerneas on the opposing side of the field, you're not exerting too much pressure with your Bronzong.
Yeah.
And maybe switching in something would take too much damage in that slot. So maybe throwing out a Hypnosis just as a Hail Mary, just to put you in a little bit of a better position, but if you miss it, it's not too bad, would actually be a good call.
Yeah, Bronzong, its offensive attack of choice is Gyro Ball,
yeah,
which Groudon resists because of the fire typing it gets when it reverts back to its primal form, and also Primal Kyogre resists it as well.
And those Pokemon might be slow as well.
Yeah,
it depends on how they're trained.
And you're not even hitting that strong because your Bronzong is going to be one invested in defenses instead of offense, right? So Bronzong can be kind of a momentum sink, but at the same time, it provides great support. It resists Xerneas. It's great Xerneas check. It's great Xerneas counter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I have noticed, though, is probably the shift between Heat Proof and Levitate, which is something that I think...
It feels like a coin flip at this point, right?
It is. Like, you're going to be able to survive most Groudon's Precipice Blades, naturally, but you won't be able to survive the Fire Punch in the sun.
Yep.
So I think Heat Proof might be a great call, especially if you're using Gravity, because you're not going to be able to stay afloat anyways, right?
Yeah.
So
I actually think it was about 50-50 at Japan Nationals. There was a in the top 8. I think about 3 or 4 of the Bronzong being used there were heat proof. There was a high percentage of heat proof Bronzong, and that's something that when Bronzong was first introduced in VGC 16, it hasn't had too much of an impact previously to that. But when it was first used in VGC 16, I think everyone would have been like, heat proof? No, that's not the play.
Right. Why have just be able to take a hit neutrally instead of have an entire immunity, right?
Yeah.
Incredibly well and be able to partner it up. Like, you have to make sure that you count your turns correctly, make sure that the main sweepers that are trying to take advantage of Trick
and I'm kind of back to the wall, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't have the speed support that I want up, so
yeah. Why don't we have a look and see what most trainers have been using on their Bronzong?
Which Bronzong's the best Bronzong?
Yeah, I mean, the one way to find out is if a Bronzong wins the World Championship. But leading up to that moment, let's see what the kind of climate for Bronzong has been previously. So let's skip over to the PGL. I'm just going to quickly bring up the Bronzong.
probably one of the more popular Pokemon right now.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if US Nationals and Japan Nationals are anything to go by, Bronzong is a big deal. I know a lot of the Italian players really like Bronzong as well.
Right, and it was featured heavily in US Nationals, right? Like, a lot of players were using Bronzong, as we see it right here.
So, Dewey, what do you reckon? Heat proof or Levitate?
I think it's still Levitate that's most popular. It has to be. Is it?
Oh,
yeah, Levitate,
by a long way.
Right, but I still think that Heat proof has its merits. Again, being able to survive Groudon attacks, like both Groudon attacks, that's huge. You know?
Yeah. And also, I mean, a really common play when you're using a Levitate Pokemon that has the ability Skill Swap is to bring a Groudon in alongside it and give it that Levitate ability so opposing Groudon cannot knock it out if it knows Earth Power or Precipice Blades.
That's a huge thing too. That's kind of one utility that Bronzong does have. Let's go back to Bronzong's moves. Obviously, Trick Room is one of the main reasons why people even use Bronzong. It's pretty loaded, right? Like Trick Room and Gyro Ball are the two most popular moves.
They synergize really, really well, don't they?
Exactly. You don't have to invest in speed. You be able to slow down your Bronzong and power up your Gyro Ball simply because, hey, I'm going to set up Trick Room. And of course, Bronzong's naturally a very slow Pokemon. I mean, look at it. Do you think that thing can move that fast?
I don't know. I've seen some speedy Bronzong. No, I have never seen a speedy Bronzong, and that kind of defeats the purpose of it. But we also see that Skill Swap and Gravity are here with Hypnosis in at number 5. So obviously these are moves that can be swapped in and swapped out at every point. And I think Gravity is such a big deal for VGC 16 because it allows so many different moves to be viable. You can
Origin Pulse, Precipice Blades, and that allows Precipice Blades to hit anything really. So the thing with Bronzong is, Trick Room and Gyro Ball, those are obvious calls, but then it kind of becomes a bit hazy coming down into the last two moves, Bronzong, if it could, I'm pretty sure we want to have 5 moves, but you have to choose between Skill Swap, Gravity, and Hypnosis. We also have to remember that, Grant Weldon, who finished in the top 4 at the United States National Championships, opted for Imprison.
Yes.
To kind of trap those moves that a lot of Bronzong players actually rely on.
Yeah, Ray and I were talking about it previously, and it's not just being able to lock a opposing player out of their Trick Room. It also allows you to stop them from using Gyro Ball. So if you're a Xerneas player, that's huge.
And that's one thing that we actually discussed just recently, wasn't it? The fact that Bronzong has great techs in Imprison to prevent your Xerneas from getting knocked out by that Gyro Ball. Grant Weldon's team, of course, did not utilize the Xerneas, but we'll have to see if anybody actually picked up on that this weekend to see if they're actually going for an imprisoned Bronzong on a Xerneas team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the main contenders, if you're not going to be using Bronzong, or maybe if you're Aaron Traylor, you will be using it alongside Bronzong, is to use Cresselia as well. And Cresselia and Bronzong have very similar roles. And I think using a Pokemon to set up Trick Room and set up Gravity or Skill Swap is a major deal in this format.
Cresselia is probably my favorite Pokemon. I used it heavily back in 2010 when their format was open to restricted Pokemon as well. And it has access to a lot of cool moves, Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, Trick Room. It has all sorts of speed control, and it has access to Ice Beam to be able to hit the Salamences harder. But I am a personal fan of Icy Wind because it kind of creates a situation where I can't switch. You force your opponent to not be able to switch because if they switch into an Icy Wind, they're already going to be behind.
Exactly.
Right?
This is how Alex Gomez performed so well at the UK National Championship. He used a Cresselia with Icy Wind and Thunder Wave, 2 forms of speed control, and he basically had Cresselia in a position where it would be lowering the speed of any Pokemon that came in, forcing switches, nailing things on the switch in, and allowing Alex basically just to control the field and put their opponent on the back foot.
A move that I really want to talk about on Cresselia is actually Helping Hand. Helping Hand is a move that takes a lot of players by surprise. A lot of Groudons, since they are on the physically bulky side, the players, they kind of believe that, hey, my Groudon will be able to survive this Precipice Blades regardless. But then once Cresselia shows that Helping Hand, the other player, you can see it in their face already. It's like,
no.
Oh no, my Groudon is now knocked out because that Helping Hand is not something that I took into account.
I mean, it can turn the tide of battle, can't it? And especially if your Cresselia is at very low health, then with the increased priority bracket of Helping Hand, you be able to get that boost off onto your partner before Cresselia gets knocked out.
Right, and what else is Cresselia going to do on the field, right? You know,
Yeah.
once it gets up to speed support, what am I going to continue doing? I'm going to continue Thunder Waving, just hoping for a switch. I'm going to continue Icy Winding for a little bit of chip damage. No, guess what? I'm going to help out my Groudon and just go for Helping Hand and pick up some surprise KOs. So I think Helping Hand is a very underutilized move, although we do see 55% of the Cresselias in the past season using it. So
it feels like in the US for Cresselia, Helping Hand is a very strong option. Earlier in Europe, it wasn't such a big deal. We kind of went more towards the
full support,
yeah,
full
exactly.
support, speed control Cresselia.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, US Nationals, there was a lot of Helping Hand Cresselia, but then obviously, Chase Libbert's Cresselia was a bit more offensively inclined. So there are different ways that people are using Cresselia, and I think for World Championships, it's going to be super interesting to see which Pokemon people are relying on more, Cresselia or Bronzor.
Yeah, and you know, Aaron Traylor's U.S. Nationals team had both, which was a very interesting call. It kind of gave him 2 support options, which is, I think, pretty nice, you know. It also forces him to pick one Mega Pokemon. You know, he was forced to use that Mega Salamence instead. He didn't have a Kangaskhan, so, you know, that's actually a nice option. You know, you don't have to go back and wonder, man, should I bring Kangaskhan or Salamence this game?
Yeah.
Which one do I do? Which one's going to be the better matchup? Instead, he's like, okay, which Pokemon's going to support my Pokemon a lot better? And then Salamence, and then Groudon and Xerneas.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting decision to make as well. Obviously, we've seen a lot in the early season that people were running 2 Mega Pokemon that they could choose. They would probably either Kangaskhan because of the fake-out access it has, and
Salamence.
also such a powerful parental bond ability, and as you say, Salamence because of the Intimidate. And
Tailwind, all sorts of things that
Hyper
Salamence can
Voice
do.
as well. Hyper Voice hits so many things for neutral damage
Alright.
in a big way.
Ayuma
It's a
just
spread
messaged
attack
me
as
and
well.
told me that she's
And
been knocked
so
out of
those
the
two
tournament,
options
unfortunately.
are extremely
But
powerful.
I'm going to
And
stop
then
recording
make the
this here
call and
because
be like,
I was
okay, will
expecting
give up
a lot
having the
more
flexibility
gameplay.
to use 2
These
Mega
guys need to
Pokemon,
learn
to have 2
what
support
people
Pokemon
watch
who
Twitch for,
do
and that's to
basically
watch
different
the
variants of
fucking
same thing.
game,
It's a big deal.
not to listen to
Yeah,
2
absolutely, you know,
jackwads yammer on
Bronzong
for
and
4
Cresselia
hours.
both have
Holy
their merits,
shit.
right? Bronzong resists
Alright,
Xerneas,
this is Magnum
which is
Knight
a
saying,
huge thing,
see you
know,
guys in the next
a
one.
in a